Welcome to Uncovering Our Hidden History. My name is Anna, and I am a genealogist and a historical researcher, and I use those two things together in order to try to uncover our hidden history about the things we've been lied to. And I started this channel to be able to show you guys proofs of what some of those things are. And on today's video, we are going to be looking at all things DNA. So again, we have a lot to cover. Let's get started. So welcome back for those of you who've been with me for a few weeks now. And if this is your first time here and you're watching this video today, I want to go ahead and recommend that you go back and watch parts 1 through 5 so that you're not completely lost. So this is part 6. We're going to do all things regarding DNA. And if you don't have, if you haven't watched the other videos, you're going to get lost. And so this is our final video in this series. And then next week, I want to do a wrap up and just kind of reading through some of the comments and things. There's been a little bit of confusion about some things. I also found an additional piece of evidence that I wanted to share while we're on this topic. And so, and then I want to do some questions and answers. So if there is something that I haven't covered or that you really want to know, especially after today's video or from any of the other parts, drop them down in the comments, but do me a favor because I get a lot of comments. Do all capital question and then like a period or a colon, and then so as I'm kind of just scrolling down, I can look for the ones that say question, and I will pick a handful and answer those next week when we do our wrap up. And then the week after that, we're going to start our Kingdom of Judah, the Kingdom of Judah series, because we can't talk about our northern Hebrews without talking about our southern ones. I keep getting comments, well, what about, the Portuguese, and what about this, and what about that, and what about the Yoruba, and what about the Lemba, and what about the Ibu, and all the different things. And yes, we're going to get there, but they didn't live up in the northern kingdom. They lived in the southern kingdom. So that will be the next series we will embark on. I have no idea how many parts that's going to be. It'll be however many it takes to get all that information conveyed. So that's just kind of what the master plan is, so to speak. So next week will be, so this is part 6. This is the final for our Northern Hebrews. And then next week will be question and answer and wrap up. And then the week after that, we'll start our Kingdom of Judah series. Okay, so we need to get going here. Let me go ahead and pull up our PowerPoint. Okay, this is the Kingdom of Israel in Tartaria and the Americas, part 6. Okay, understanding the difference between Jew and Hebrew. That confounds and confuses people all the time because, and that this is, I think, by design, our controllers put out a false narrative that the Jews are the descendants of the ancient Hebrews, and now they call everybody a Jew, whether you're a Ashkenazi Jew or a Judean Jew. They just call everybody Jews, which is incorrect. So basically, if you look to the left, just adjust this. If you look to the left at the orange pedigree chart, this is Noah's son Japheth, and he had 7 sons, which you can see at the top, and then Gomer, who was his oldest, had 3 sons, Ashkenaz, Riphath, and Togarmah. Okay, and so we don't really know much about Riphath, but Ashkenaz and Togarmah at different times converted to the Judean religion. Okay, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit more. And then to the right, the blue pedigree chart, we have Noah's son Shem, and then the biblical Hebrews descend from Shem's son Arpachshad. Okay, so you can see how I've taken that all the way down. So Ashkenazi and Khazars come from Japheth, and the Hebrew Israelites, both the northern kingdom, because they did split. So that's why you need to go back and watch the other parts, because I cover when they split into 2 different kingdoms. So both northern Israel and the southern kingdom of Judah both come from Shem. Okay, so as promised, and I'm going to cover this in a little bit more detail when I do my series on the Jews, like their history and where they came from and all of that. But I just wanted to compare, because I've been getting a lot of questions about the DNA. So here's, I've got 2 DNA studies for you. This first one was from June 20th, 2016, and it says how DNA traced the Ashkenazi Jews to northeastern Turkey. Northeastern Turkey has not received much attention from scholars of Jewish history. It was not an area of dispute nor a region known to host famous schools such as the Jewish academies in Babylon, where the Talmud was written. There was only fragmented historical records of Jewish settlements in this area. But genetics can now track DNA 1,500 years into the past with village-level geographical accuracy. This accuracy was made possible with geographical population structure, or what we call GPS, technology, which works in a similar way to sat-nav geolocation systems and uses DNA instead of satellites to predict the most recent geographical origins of a DNA sample. To study the geographical origins of Yiddish, which is the native language of Ashkenazi Jews, the author is saying, my lab at the University of Sheffield has applied this GPS technology to the DNA of Ashkenazi Jews. Surprisingly, the results led us to northeastern Turkey, a finding that contradicts the Orthodox view that the Ashkenazi Jewry emerged in Germany. So basically how this GPS system works is there are geneticists, and National Geographic has been doing a huge undertaking with Dr. Wells, and they are literally going around to all of the very old countries and taking DNA samples with permission. No one's being held down and having their DNA taken. They will go to these very, all the old countries where people stayed. They've never left. Like, all of us have family members, especially here in like America. Everybody who had family members that migrated here still have family members in the countries that they came from. And so the geneticists are going to the countries where the people have been there for hundreds, if not thousands of years, and taking DNA samples with permission. And then those DNA samples become the reference samples. And then when people like the rest of us do our little DNA, test kits or whatever, they will test the DNA samples against those reference samples and go, oh, okay, well, you're showing DNA from this country and you're showing DNA from that country. And so that's how, when you take a DNA test, they're, in a simplistic way of explaining, they're able to look at your DNA and see where it seems to geopopulate back to. And so that's what they've done with the Ashkenazi Jews, is they've been able to trace them backwards, because the prevailing theory for the last many years is that the Jews originated in Germany. It's called the Rhineland hypothesis. But this researcher, Aaron Eliak, and I'm sure I'm not pronouncing his name right, but he has been spearheading this project. So let's go ahead and move on. And so in the upper right corner, I put a picture from the DNA study of Turkey. Okay, and we'll explain what's going on here in just a second. So our continued research revealed that the ancestry of nearly all Ashkenazic Jews could be traced to 4 ancient villages with remarkable names: Ashkenaz or Ashkenaz, Ashkenaz or Ashkenaz, Ashkenaz, and Ashkuz. These names might be derived from the word Ashkenaz and are unique to northeastern Turkey. There are no other such place names anywhere in the world. However, this area had a rich history. And so if you look where like all the little green trees are on the picture, you can see those 4 names that I just said. Those are 4 villages, all having some variation of Ashkenaz. And they are in the eastern part of Turkey, which borders Georgia and Iran, which Iran anciently was Persia, okay? Or Iran. Yes, anciently was Persia. So it says, until the 1st century BCE, the region was part of the Greek kingdom of Pontus. It had been established by Greek settlers in the early 1st millennium. At that time, Iranian Jews were the largest Jewish community in the world. They held a monopoly on trading on the Silk Roads and were known to Judaize the people they encountered. Now, these Iranian Jews are the Persian Jews, these being the ones that were from Judea and Jerusalem that were taken into, the whole story of Esther. So the whole story of Esther, Queen Esther, or Hadassah, is talking about that. And then when, I don't know if it was Darius, which Persian king, because Persia and Media merged together, and many of the Judeans there were allowed to go back to Jerusalem to work on building the wall and the temple, but not everybody left to go back. There were quite a few that had settled in and they had lives there, and they stayed. So only a remnant, actually, including the prophet Ezra, and his Hebrew name is Esdras. So you've heard me talk about the 1st book and 2nd book of Esdras. That is the prophet Ezra from our scriptures, from the Bible. And he led a group of these people back. And then eventually, not too long after, Nehemiah also obtained the Persian king's or the Median king's permission to leave, and he also went back. So that's who we're talking about when they're talking about Iranian Jews here. These are actually Judeans who were taken into captivity to Persia, and then these stayed. So apparently they were trying to convert people to the Judaic religion along the Silk Road. So that's who they're talking about. So it says traces of the Iranian conversion of the Ashkenazic population can be found in the genetic similarity of the two populations. The residues of Iranian that are in Yiddish and by certain genetic disorders common to Iranian and Ashkenazic people today, which is of crucial importance to medical research. These findings are of great interest to historians, geneticists, linguists, and the large community of genealogists. But genealogy was not always a popular hobby. It was not until the early civil rights movement of the late 19th century that non-elites, that the rest of us who weren't pedigreed or of royal blood or of money blood, the rest of us could finally be able to research our ancestry. And it said before then, genealogy had been something the elites used to legitimize their political rule. Okay, here is a second DNA study done about the same time. Localizing Ashkenazic Jews to primeval villages in the ancient Iranian lands of Ashkenaz. So this is kind of the same, but it gives a little bit more information. And it just says, recently the geographical origins of Ashkenaz Jews and their native language Yiddish were investigated by applying the GPS to a cohort of exclusively Yiddish-speaking and multilingual AJs, which are Ashkenazi Jews. GPS localized most Ashkenazi Jews along major ancient trade routes in northeastern Turkey, adjacent to primeval villages with names that resemble the word Ashkenaz. These findings were compatible with the hypothesis of an Irano-Turkic Slavic origin. Let me try that again. Basically, an Iranian Turco-Slavic origin for Ashkenazi Jews and a Slavic origin for Yiddish. And it's at odds with the Rhineland hypothesis, which advocated a Levantine origin for Ashkenazi Jews and German origin for Yiddish. So I'm not going to read all of that. You guys can go read that. And I'm also going to drop the links to all of these studies in the description. So you guys, if you want to go read them for yourselves, you can do that. Okay, so again, there's that picture. You can see those 4 villages are in northeastern Turkey. And then it just goes through, the whole thing. It says a little bit different, but basically the same. And again, not going to read all of it now because I do have several slides we need to get through. So like I said, I'm going to go ahead and just drop those links in the description and you guys can go read these in their entirety, okay? Because I just took screenshots of what I felt was the most relevant. But they're basically saying that, again, that the Persian Judeans Judaized the Ashkenazi along the Silk Road. Okay, so and they're studying the breakdown of the Yiddish language, and it's just a really excellent article, and it really does debunk the whole Rhineland hypothesis. They didn't originate there. They migrated there when whatever happened in their area drove them out, but they did not originate there. And then for those of you whose programming is going to go wacko and you're going to start having steam come out of your ears, next to that is a list of all the references they used in this study. So knock yourself out. You can go and look into every one of those. Should keep you busy for a while. Okay, so now let's talk about the Khazars, right? I hear on all these different YouTube channels, oh, the Khazarian Mafia and the Khazar. So let's talk about who the Khazars are. And they are not the Ashkenazi. They are cousins of the Ashkenazi, but they are not one and the same, although I have no doubt that they don't team up and work together at times. So this, the following paragraphs, or the following screenshots I'm going to share with you, come from the 13th tribe, written by secular Jew Arthur Koestler, and I believe that was published 1957. And then the gentleman whose picture is on the right, I had to do some digging to find him, and he is an ethnic Judean. He was part of the Judeans that survived the destruction of Jerusalem, and many were taken to Rome, and there were many that were taken to Spain, but Spain's older name was Safar, because I believe at that point it all wasn't united as Spain. Okay, so it says, Mr. Koestler says, in the time period between 954 to 961 AD, a man by the name of Hasdai ibn Shaprut, so Ibn would be like Ben, son of. So Hasdai, son of Shaprut, an ethnic Judean, serving as chief minister to the Caliph of Cordoba in Safar, Spain. And he sent letters to King Joseph, who we'll meet on the next slide, who was Kagan, which is king of the Khazars. Hasdai ibn Shaprut was of a very good reputation, known as the most brilliant figure in the Golden Age. And the Golden Age, I guess, was 900 to 1200 AD. So he was the most brilliant figure in the Golden Age of the Judeans of Spain. Hasdai had heard about a free and thriving Jewish kingdom from some merchant traders in Persia, and was very eager to know more about this Jewish kingdom. So he sent a letter by courier to King Joseph, or Kagan Joseph. According to Arthur Koestler, the letter contained a list of questions about the Khazar state, its people, method of government, its rights in observing the Sabbath, armed forces, and so on, including an inquiry as to which of the 12 tribes of Israel that King Joseph belonged. This seems to indicate that Hasdai believed the Jewish Khazars to hail from Palestine, as the Spanish Judeans did, and perhaps even to represent one of the lost tribes, right? Everybody wanted to know, where did the lost tribes go? They lost, many lost track of them after they left the cities of the Assyrians and the Medes. So, he's thinking, could he be from one of the lost tribes? But Joseph, not being of Jewish descent or Judean descent, belonged, of course, to none of the tribes. In Hasdai's letter to King Joseph, he gives a glowing account of the prosperity of Moorish Spain. So the Moors are ruling, who were Muslim, were ruling Spain at this point. So in Hasdai's letter to King Joseph, he gives a glowing account of the prosperity of Moorish Spain, about the pleasant living conditions of the Judeans under Caliph Abdul Rahman. The name of the country where these Judeans live is in Hebrew called Sepharad, but how the Ishmaelites who inhabit it call it Al-Andalus. Hasdai ibn Shaprut ends his letter with the following words. I feel the urge to know the truth, whether there is really a place on this earth where harassed Israel can rule itself, where it is subject to no one. If I were to know that this is indeed the case, I would not hesitate to forsake all honors, to resign my high office, to abandon my family, and to travel over mountain and plains, over land and water, until I arrived at the place where my Lord, the King, rules. And I also have one more request, to be informed whether you have any knowledge of the possible date of the final miracle, meaning the coming of the Messiah, which, wandering from country to country, we are awaiting. Dishonored and humiliated in our dispersion, we have to listen in silence to those who say, every nation has its own land, and you alone possess not even a shadow of a country on this earth. King Joseph's reply, is less accomplished and moving than Hasdai's letter. It starts with a fanfare of greetings, then reiterates the main contents of Hasdai's letter, proudly emphasizing that the Khazar kingdom gives the lie to those who say that the scepter of Judah has forever fallen from the Jews' hands, and that there is no place on earth for a kingdom of their own. Kagan Joseph then proceeds to provide a genealogy of his people. Though a fierce Jewish nationalist, proud of wielding the scepter of Judah, he cannot and does not claim for them Semitic descent. He traces their ancestry not to Shem, but to Noah's third son, Japheth, more precisely to Japheth's grandson, Togarma, the ancestor of all the Turkish tribes. Quote unquote, King Joseph replied, we have found in the family registers of our fathers that Togarma had 10 sons, and the names of their offspring are as follows: the Ugar, the Dursa, Avars, Huns, Basili, Tarniak, Khazars, Zagora, the Bulgars, and Sibir. We are the sons of Khazar, the 7th. The characteristic feature in this genealogical exercise is the amalgamation of Genesis with Turkish tribal tradition, is what Mr. Kessler, the author, writes. So, let's go back for a minute. So if you look in the upper right corner, there is King Joseph. And we can see he has red hair, very pale skin. Okay, and then below this is a pedigree chart that I created just so to give a visual picture of that genealogy. Okay, now on this slide, I wanted to put up the biblical, I can't remember if I got this from a biblical website or where I found it. This was like 5 years ago, y'all. But anyway, you can clearly see up at the top is the Black Sea, and then to the far right is the Caspian Sea, and then you've got all of those descendants, or many of those descendants of Japheth there. You've got Ashkenaz in Turkey, as well as Togarma, kind of underneath. And then you've got Gomer, Menai, and then there's the Scythians. So I'm sure that there was a lot of probably intermarrying as well. Now, to the right is a map from 850 AD of the kingdom of Khazaria. And Khazaria was a huge kingdom up until about, I want to say, I think like the 1300s or the 1400s. And then they were completely destroyed. Well, the Rus came in first and destroyed their capital city. And I think that was in the 1200s, maybe 1300s. I have those exact dates in my slides for when we cover the history of the Jews. So off the top of my head, I can't remember exactly. But the Rus came in first, destroyed their capital city, and then the Mongols under Genghis Khan finished them off in, I think, the late 1300s, early 1400s. And then they fled. They fled from there into Eastern Europe and settled in like the Crimea, Poland, some cities of Russia, which I don't even know if Russia was, I don't think Russia was Russia then. They were independent city-states like Kiev, Muscovy, which is Moscow, and so on and so forth. So they just basically fled everywhere into Eastern Europe. And then on this map of Khazaria, you can see where before, underneath the Black Sea, where we had Ashkenaz and Togarma and those, everybody seems to have shifted, and we have the Byzantine Empire taking over that space, and then south of them is the Muslim Caliphate. Okay, so that was just a brief little bit to show you who the Jews were, the Ashkenazi and the Khazars who converted to the Judaic religion. So let's get into just a brief understanding of how DNA works. Okay, so I found this article from The Atlantic, and I just thought it was because you guys know by now I love pictures. And it says, the most mysterious cells in our bodies don't belong to us. You carry literal pieces of your mom and dad, maybe your grandma, your siblings, and your aunts and uncles. And so what they mean by that is, as we get further into this, you'll understand how autosomal DNA works and how you can end up having, let's say, a family of all blonde people, and then you've got one redhead or a brunette in the mix, or maybe everybody in your family's dark, but then you end up with someone who's a redhead and nobody can figure out where they came from. So we'll talk about how that happens. And then to the right, this is a picture of, so if you take a DNA test from one of the testing companies, you're going to get an option to see a picture of your chromosomes, and they're in bar format, and it says, these are your chromosomes. We've painted them with your Ancestry composition results. The first 22 are called autosomes and come in pairs of 2, each represented by one of the colored horizontal lines in the graphic below. And by the way, this is not mine or anybody I know. I just randomly grabbed it off, I think, 23andMe. Chromosomes have different lengths and are named 1 through 22 when sorted by size. So you notice, starting up at the top with 1, those segments of chromosomes are long, very, very long. And then by the time you get down towards number 22, they get increasingly shorter as you go down. Okay? And then there is the 23rd chromosome. You get one chromosome, a gender chromosome from your mom and one from your dad, which determines the gender. And that's represented below by the X. That X means it is female. Okay. So here's another picture of what they look like. The segments actually look like. Okay, you can see up at the top, we've got bigger, longer ones, and then as we work our way down, they get shorter and smaller. So there's 22 from each parent, so you end up with 44 total of the autosomal, the chromosomes, and then 2 are going to be gender chromosomes, one from your mom and one from your dad. Now, women have XX. Okay, we receive an X gender chromosome from our mom, and then our dads give us an X chromosome. And if you're a male, you will have X from your mother, and you will have Y. So basically, the male determines the gender of the baby, because within the sperm, the men carry X and Y, and then depending on which one pairs with the egg, if it was an X meeting with the egg, because the eggs will only have X. So if a sperm with an X chromosome pairs, then that is XX, and that child will be female. If the sperm has a Y chromosome, and then it meets the egg, which is an X, then that will be XY, and that will be a male child. Okay. And then to the right of this is mitochondrial chromosome. And this is kind of, if you cut it, it's like a nucleus. And how it carries all the mitochondrial DNA that your body needs. And so that is passed from only the mother to her children, whether you're a boy or a girl. Okay. Okay. Now there's 3 different kinds of chromosomes. Okay. We have the Y chromosome DNA, which is passed from father to son. And let's see if I can get my fist here. So Y DNA and for males and mitochondrial DNA for females will pass almost wholly intact from mother to daughter, or mother to child, but the Y DNA is only from father to son. And so the sons, however many there are of that father, they'll get the exact Y DNA from their father that the father got from the grandfather, and that the grandfather got from the great-grandfather. And then maybe every few hundred of years there might be a little mutation on that, and I have a picture form to show you what that looks like. So autosomal DNA, which are your 22 chromosomes, those can recombine. And so if you look at the picture there in the middle at the very top, so let's say those are grandparents, you have a grandfather who's colored orange, then he's married to a woman who's pink, and then then they'll say that's your dad's, that's the dad's family. Okay. And you can see the dad, he's half orange and half pink, because he got 23 from his mom and 23 from his dad. And remember, the third is the gender chromosomes. So and then the same for the lady, his wife that he marries. She's got 22 chromosomes from her mom, 22 from her dad, and then she's got 2 gender chromosomes. So 23, from each, equaling 46 total. And then those 2 have a child, and you can see that child at the bottom has all 4 colors. So I have a diagram to show you how this works, but this is how you can end up, let's say you've got 3 or 4 siblings, or you've got children. We'll say, for those of you who have children. For those of you who don't have children, look at your siblings. Every single one of them gets 50% DNA from mom and 50% from dad. However, you don't get the exact same DNA. The only exception to this is identical twins, because they're formed and the egg or the cell splits. So they've got identical copies of each other. But by and large, so in our picture here, we have, let's just say there's 2 children, right? Each child is going to get 50% chromosomes from mom, 50% from dad, but they won't be the exact. There'll be some overlap. They'll both get some that are the same, but not all. So if you see a bunch of children, or if you and your siblings all really look alike, it's very obvious to anybody who meets you that you all look alike, it's likely that you share higher concentrations of the same chromosomes. But in some families where everybody, people would not be able to guess that they were related, they pulled different chromosomes. And so let's explain this a little bit. Oh, and then of course I talked about the mitochondrial DNA to the right. And let me just say as well, y'all have permission, please take screenshots of all of these. These are going to help you, or could help you, because there's been some confusion. You can share this video, YouTube has the little arrow thing. You can share, pass it on. You can take screenshots and then save them into like a Word document or a Google Doc and make yourself your own PDF. And some people have been like, I don't know how to how to take a screenshot of your slides. I have a Mac, and for the Mac, you're going to hold down the Command button, the Shift button, and then the F4 button. One at a time, but you're going to keep them all down at the same time. So Command, Shift, F4, and I think it's probably similar with PCs. It probably is like, what is it? I'm trying to think what that button is called, but you have a similar button to our Command button, and then Shift, and then F4, and then it's going to give you like a little thing will come up with like a cross, and then you literally just hold down on your mouse and you go up to the upper left corner and you can drag it across and drag it down. And then when you release the mouse, it'll sound like a camera clicking. And that's how you can take screenshots and then put them into a PDF and make your own PDF for research or to pass on to others. Okay. So again, I just kind of went over this. This is how autosomal DNA recombines. Okay, now I love to get on to the Useful Charts YouTube channel. That guy has done an amazing job, and he's got all kinds of pedigree charts. So I like going on there and checking out like all of the royals, all of he's got pedigree charts for like all of the Hebrews, all of the biblical pedigrees starting with Noah down. He's got a ton of stuff. But anyway, I just happened to see this little chart on there, and I was like, oh, that'll be perfect. So I just took a screenshot of that, and then I made sure to put down in the bottom right corner where I got that from. So that's from Useful Charts. But this is a perfect example of how DNA works. Okay, so see this person in the center, and it says you, and then to the right is mom, and to the dad, or to the left is dad. And so you are getting 50% of your DNA from mom, and you're getting 50% from dad. Now, looking at mom, going back a generation to what would be the grandparents, within that 50% that you're getting from mom, 25% of that is DNA from grandma and grandpa. And the same with dad. Within the 50% autosomal DNA that you are getting from dad, you're getting 25% from his mom and dad. So you're getting 25% roughly of your grandparents' DNA through the 50% from each of your parents. And then if you go another generation back to your great-grandparents, within the 25% that you're getting from each grandparent, you're getting about 12 or 12.5% of your chromosomes from the great-grandparents. Okay? And then to the great-great-grandparents, if you go back another generation, you're getting 6% DNA from those. And so as it comes down, it halves. Okay? But then as you go backwards, so let's say you have 20%. Let me see. 20% what? Okay, 20% Russian DNA. You do, okay? And let's say it's coming from your father's side. Well, then double it back. So if you've got 20% and you got half of his DNA, then if you work backwards, then that means he had 40% Russian DNA. And then if you double that, because remember, it keeps halving as it comes down. So then if your father has 40% Russian DNA, his father, who will be your grandfather, is going to have 80%. And so if you want to try to figure out from your percentage which one of those ancestors had roughly about 100% of a certain one, you can go backwards and find out which generation that was. So this is how autosomal DNA works. So this is how you end up within a family of maybe having all brunettes and then one blonde. That was in my family. I had one sister who was blonde, and she didn't look like the rest of us, but she looked like she got pulled DNA from one of the, I think it was the great-grandparents, great-grandmothers that had blonde hair. So that's how that works. Okay, now we've talked about autosomal DNA and how that can recombine, giving you different traits, right? But remember again that the Y DNA and the mitochondrial DNA, they don't recombine. They transfer completely, almost intact, pretty much completely intact from fathers to sons and then mothers to her children. And we call that, within that, we call that a haplogroup. So let's read the description of that. A haplogroup is a genetic population of people who share a common ancestor on either their paternal or their maternal line, so either their father's line or mother's line. And it says, haplogroups follow male and female descendancy lines with Y DNA passing from father to son and mitochondrial DNA passing from mothers to both daughters and sons. All haplogroups start as the original haplogroup in Africa, and as the many millennia have passed by, more and more haplogroups have come to be, and that's because of those mutations I mentioned. Every several hundred of years on one of those, DNA chromosomes, there might be a little mutation, which then starts a subgroup in that haplogroup. Each time the DNA has mutated, a group has split off and they have become their own haplogroup. And I have a picture of this. Okay, so I made these two trees. And so just kind of teaching you what the technical terms are and then showing you in practicality what these are. So on the left, you see a bare tree, and from the bottom up, it says that's the trunk. And then the major branches, the big branches, are called clades, C-L-A-D-E. And then as you follow those bigger branches for a little bit, you notice the bigger branches start to have offshoots come off of them. And then the smaller offshoots, they're still attached to the big branch, but those are those mutations, okay? And so we call the mutations that break off, those are subclades. So look to the right now. So let's say that the tree on the right is a Y DNA. So geneticists are tracking, they're trying to track, and this is how we have and we know so many different haplogroups, because they have been testing all of those those reference samples, but then people all over the world, and finding out what kind of clade or what branch they belong to, and if it's splintered off, which sub-branch is that. So there is technically, obviously it's not like a real tree. We just use that as an analogy. But there's a Y DNA haplogroup tree, and then a mitochondrial DNA. So one for male and one for female. And so if you look at the one that I made on the right, I put at the base of the trunk Adam, and then going up Noah, And then each one of those big branches, one is Ham, one is Japheth, and one is Shem. And they're the big, thick branches that have split off from Noah. And then if you look at each one of them, so Shem is E1. That was the main clade or subclade. And then as mutations started to occur, one split off and we have E1A. And then another mutation occurred from Shem's descendants and we have E1B. Okay, and then J has also come in here further down. And so I've just put in here where you can see the main clades, the main branches, and then the little splintering off, which are those mutations when they occurred. And then you can see Japheth's line, you have a lot of the R1As and the R1 was the main clade, and then we have R1A and R1B, I think are the main ones. I'm not sure if we have R1C. I may have just gotten a little carried away with myself. And then for Ham, we have E3. Okay, and then those mutations from there. So please, again, feel free, take screenshots of these. And you're welcome to share them. The only thing I ask is just please give this channel credit when you share them. Just don't, claim them as your material, but I'm happy for you to share with others, right? And a picture is worth 1,000 words. And then if you see in the bottom right corner of the tree, Noah's tree, you'll see it says Y chromosomal atom, and A is highlighted red. A is the oldest haplogroup linked to Adam. Okay, now here again on the left we have the Y-DNA world haplogroup tree, and then basically if you look at just like a regular tree, so I just put up at the top, here's a helpful tip for kind of trying to sort this out in your mind. The main branches, the big ones like Shem, Ham, and Japheth, are called clades, and they are the clans. They're the main clan family. And then the sub-branches that come off of the main clade are called subclades. And then these are the different family groups within each family clan. And then the leaves of the tree would be the people within each of the family groups. So hopefully that helps make this a little bit easier to understand. If you think of the main clades as the main branches, and then the subclades as, the branches that come off of the bigger branches, and then they have the leaves as well, which are the family members. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about the male DNA haplogroups. Okay, so again, because we went over the Jewish, the history of the Ashkenazi and the Khazarian Jews. Okay, so I just wanted to show you here. I just Googled this. So I said, what haplogroups did ancient Israelites have? And it says, ancient Israelites were the following haplogroups in order of probable frequency. So it says E1B, 1B, 1C, 1. Or I'm not sure what the designation of EM34 is. But so basically, again, from the example, E1 would have been the main clade, the main branch. And then the B1, B1, these are all, the more you add these little ones, these are all mutations. So it was E1 and then E1B and then E1B1, so this is how the mutations work. And then eventually we've got J2 and J1. Now I said, what is the most common haplogroup for Jews? And this, the top one, I'm having a little bit of a hard time believing the answer. But it says, besides the 4 haplogroup K and N1b founders, the major haplogroup in Ashkenazi Jews is haplogroup H. So I don't know how that could be the main one at 23%. And then down below, which this one is, and the reason I'm having a hard time with haplogroup H, if you look down at the bottom, I took like a little screenshot of the R1 haplogroups, and H, those are the Dravidians, which, if I understand that correctly, the Dravidians are the people of southern India. So I don't know how the haplogroup H, I don't think they would be linked to the southern Indians. So, but the bottom here, it says the most common haplotype is R M17 in the total Ashkenazi sample. So basically, and remember from the DNA studies, we learned that there was some, in the midst of being Judaized by the Persian Jews, by the Iranian Jews, there was some intermarrying. And so you'll see R1A down here says Indo-Iranian. And then also up here says R1A D2 is Turkic. So you can tell very quickly that the two are completely, the ancient Israelites and the Jews have 2 completely different haplogroups. So one more proof for you. Okay, and then here is another screenshot I took for you. So the blue dot is Adam, and then they're saying that Adam was in East Africa, and then it just shows his migration and the different subclades that came off of the E. Okay, now this one is probably my favorite that I like to reference. This is the world map of Y DNA haplogroups. So this would be a really good one for you guys to screenshot and just keep handy if you're male. And it will tell you, you can see over here to the left, in Africa, you've got the E1A, the E3A, E3B1, you've got all of those E haplogroups, clades and subclades over here. And then up above that in the blue, in Western Europe, you've got the R1Bs. Okay, and then I think Eastern Europe is R1A, which would be the Jews primarily, but probably in Western Europe too, like in Germany. Okay, so this would be a good one to have to reference back. And compare your, if you've taken a Y DNA test as males, you can, use that for reference. Now, on the left here, this is just a chart showing the haplogroups oldest to youngest, and you can see that A and B are the oldest haplogroups, and then it's interesting that they don't have E on here, but I do believe that would be coming off. Oh wait, they do have E. Yes, they got DE. Okay, so that is there. And then again, here's the chart with Y chromosomal atom, and then you can see A at the bottom. So those are older. Those are the older haplogroups, the older lines. And then I just want to throw a shout out to Tracy at Genesis and Genetics. So she's been following the videos, and she dropped this in the comments, and I was just blown away. And so Tracy, if you're still watching, thank you so much for giving us this information. And she says, at Genesis and Genetics, we have examined Y chromosome genomes searching for Noah and his 3 sons, Ham, Japheth, and Shem. They were easy to find. according to our analysis, if you have, and now these numbers she gives are specific chromosomes. Okay, so they're not haplogroups, they're specific chromosomes. If you have the RS 1730667 Y chromosome mutation, nucleotide A, you are from Shem. If you have the RS 9786139 Y chromosome mutation, nucleotide A, you are from Ham. And then this doesn't look like it got finished, but I'm assuming the following one might be for Japheth. So thank you so much, because I don't get into the nitty-gritty of necessarily looking at the specific chromosomes themselves, because I am a genealogist, I'm not a geneticist. So thank you, Tracy, for that. Okay, so let's look at the female DNA haplogroups. Okay, this chart looks a little bit different. On the left, you can see in kind of the burgundy box, it says Eve. This is mitochondrial Eve. And basically showing that she's in East Africa as well. And then you can see that we have L1 and L2 coming off from her. And then you can kind of see where all of those other ones have splintered off, or the mutations have come off, because we all come from Noah, right? We all come from Adam and Eve, and then from one of Noah's 3 sons. So, and then this will map the ones that have come into the Americas throughout North, Central, and South America. So this is for mitochondrial DNA, for which the mothers pass on to her children. Okay, so here is another screenshot that I thought might be helpful to you. So for mitochondrial Eve, there's LO, L1, L2, and L3. And it's saying that L1 specifically links for females. This is not males, this is for females, to West Africa. And they're saying L2 is a designation for South Africa. And then for L3, it's saying that all of the other female haplogroups have come off of L3. Okay. The following screenshots that I'm going to show you come out of this book called DNA for Native American Genealogy by Roberta Estes. She herself being from the Cherokee. And so I just want to share these talking about the female mitochondrial DNA, but male as well. So she starts with the mitochondrial, though. She says only women pass mitochondrial DNA, shown in the chart on the previous page by the little hearts, which I didn't put that in here, to their descendants. So everyone's mitochondrial DNA descends from their direct maternal line. Your mother, her mother, her mother, and on up your tree. If your direct matrilineal or maternal ancestor was Native American on her mother's side, then her haplogroup will be one of the known and proven indigenous native haplogroups. Proven Native American haplogroups for the maternal line are proven to be A, B, C, D, and X. Some haplogroups, subgroups, or subclades of the aforementioned haplogroups are proven to be native and some are not, which results in confusion. In other words, everyone in haplogroup A is not Native American, but within haplogroup A, a subgroup called A2 and downstream haplogroups such as A2A and A2B and so forth are proven to be Native American. In addition to current testers, legitimate Native American haplogroups have been identified in ancient remains as well. And then I underline, she says, no haplogroups other than the subgroups of A, B, C, and D, and X have been found in ancient remains in the Americas. Put another way, if haplogroups were found among the native people before contact with the Europeans, then we would find ancient DNA in native burials that includes haplogroups, those other haplogroups, but they do not, is what she's saying. So this connected a big dot, a big piece of the puzzle for me when I saw this, because if you look to the right on the mitochondrial haplogroup map and you look above Eve, you've got L1 and L2. Now, if you look at L2, so actually do this. Go over to the Americas and find haplogroup C and D. So if you notice haplogroups C and D, if you trace them backwards, they trace back to L2. So that is saying, so we're finding, so remember mitochondrial Eve was L1 and, or from mitochondrial Eve was L1 and L2. So that would be Hebrew DNA within, specifically L1, because I believe L2 was South Africa. So West Africa, the female, the mitochondrial DNA would be L2. And so if you looking at L2, you can see that went over into the Americas, and you see that as haplogroup C and D. Okay. So this would be another good chart to take a screenshot of. Okay, so then Miss Estes, I just took screenshots of each of these. So these are maps kind of plotting. The first one is where ancient haplogroup A and its subclades are, where in the Americas that is. And then the second one is ancient haplogroup B and its subclades, and it plots them throughout the Americas where they tend to be concentrated. And then the same for haplogroup C, and then the same for haplogroup D. And so I just put them up there so that you could compare. Okay, now I found this very interesting. It says, haplogroup M has been confounding researchers for years. Blah, 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 blah. And then it says, recent analysis has revealed numerous individuals indicating native ancestry with various haplogroup M subclades, but none sufficiently convincing to stand alone, meaning there's no specific tribal affiliation where, they can all be linked to. Furthermore, these people did not all fall into the same haplogroup M subclade, but instead individually in many subclades of M. Confusing the situation further, we know that haplogroup M is found sporadically in continental Africa and on the island nation of Madagascar off the east coast of Africa. Some enslaved people were imported from this region during slave trading, which means that haplogroup M could be found in people who identify as both native and also mixed African. Okay, so I think this is what we've been showing, where there are Black Native Americans. Okay, everybody gets so confused by the Black Native American tribes because they just assume that these were all former slaves that decided to link up and join tribes, but that's not true. And we're going to talk about this more as we go on. So anyway, I found that very, very interesting. Okay, male DNA. So there's two main haplogroups for Native American males. There is Y DNA haplogroup Q, and then and so we'll do that. It says the oldest haplogroup Q sample dates from, and I don't get caught up, I don't think it's 15,000 years ago. They want to make everything seem so far away, or so many years ago. But I don't think it was that long ago. But it says the oldest haplogroup Q sample dates from the Altai region of Russia. Other ancient samples are found in the Baikal region, which is near Baikal Lake up in Siberia, Mongolia, and throughout Siberia, including the Chukotka Peninsula in the far eastern Siberia, the gateway to Beringia, which it's not that, it's the Bering Straits or the Aleutian Islands or Kamchatka. Those were the main three places where they could have crossed. I had forgotten about the Aleutian Islands when we were talking about that in part 2 or 3. So there were Aleutian Islands they could have crossed to get into America. Those northern tribes would have crossed either the Aleutian Islands or the Kamchatka Islands. And then the ones that were further south would have used Onion Straits, or what we now call Bering Straits. It says the oldest Native American sample in the Anzac child, a Clovis burial dating from, I'm not going back there, in western Montana. Anyway, you can read that to what that says. So that is ancient Y-DNA haplogroup Q. And then, so here is a map on the left showing where haplogroup Q and all of its subclades or subbranch, all of its mutations are. And you can see there's quite a few in Central and South America, but kind of spaced out throughout North America. And then to the right, it says these are all the haplogroup Q tribal affiliations, and it lists all of those. Okay, now the other one is haplogroup C, and I'm still trying to sort this one out. So it says haplogroup C is found much less frequently than haplogroup Q in Native American populations. And then to the right, you can see where haplogroup C is throughout the Americas. Okay. And then here I put them side by side. On the left is haplogroup C, and on the right is haplogroup Q, and you can see there's by far much more of haplogroup Q. So what does this mean? I'm so glad you asked. Okay. Most people are much more familiar with the Asian-looking Native Americans. I think this is, when we think Native American, I think this is what comes to most of our minds, right? But it may surprise many of you to know that there were numerous black Indian tribes, right? It had nothing to do with slavery. They were never escaped slaves or emancipated slaves that joined Native American groups. These people were always black tribes, like the Algonquin. So I have their main picture in the center, and this is from the Northeast Annual Powwow of Algonquin Indians in 1925. And then I took screenshots to make them bigger, and so that you could see all the various black Native Americans that are in this tribe. Some are dressed in tribal dress or ceremonial dress, and some are not. The ones that are not, the ones that are wearing suits or the bowler hats and jackets, if you saw them on the street, you would just automatically assume that they had been former slaves, but it's not the case. And then I don't know if you can see in the bottom right corner, I have a red arrow pointing. That little lady is my absolute favorite. She just looks like she's happy, that she's got one of those happy dispositions, and I would, if I lived in that time, I would have wanted to know her and sit and pick her brain and talk to her about so many things. But she just has such a happy demeanor about her that I always have to smile when I see her picture. Okay, but then we also have, let me pull this out so you can see, over here in the right upper corner, this is Mary Duncan, and she is holding a sign, Black Indians United. She belonged to the Choctaw. So it says there were individuals of Black Indian descent like Mary Duncan who traced her lineage within the Choctaw Nation to a time before the institution of slavery. In a 2004 interview, Mary Duncan, a member of the Choctaw Nation in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, stated that there were many Black Indians in the Americas before the arrival of the Pilgrims. She emphasized that the Native Americans' fight was for citizenship as Black Indians, not African Americans. And they traced their roots back to Native American ancestors, not African ones. So these Black Native Americans are very, very proud of their heritage and their ancestors, and these would have been Hebrews. They would have come from the northern tribe. Think back to part 1 when I showed you what the northern the people of northern Israel, what they look like from the Assyrian reliefs when they were being taken out. They were a black people, a dark people. Okay, not as dark as Ham's descendants, but reddish brown often. So if you're reading scripture and it describes someone as ruddy, I did a Hebrew lemma study on that, and ruddy means brownish red, which a lot of our Native Americans are, but they were also brownish black as well. So Mary is proud to be a Choctaw Indian. And then in the upper top, at the top on the other side of the little wording, this is a lady, she is from the Seminole tribe. And then let me pull this out, and then to the left we learned about the Seminole Indians the time before, and last time, right, in part 5. But these were Negro Scouts. These were Seminole Indian Negro Scouts during the Civil War. You know what? And I'll just move this over if anybody wants to take a quick screenshot so you don't have to have my face in it. If you want to take a screenshot of that. Okay. And then in the middle row here to the left, kind of underneath the Seminole Indian Scouts, this is Pretty Flower, and she's from the Seneca tribe on the East Coast, New York, I believe. And then the gentleman next to her, I don't have a name for him, but he came up in my research. And look at that amazing headdress he's wearing. And then to the right of him, the Native American, the Indian that's on the white horse, that is someone from the Blackfoot tribe. Okay, and then underneath Mary Duncan, in the bottom right corner, that is a Mandan chief, Mandan. He looks very tall and big. And then to the left of him, those ladies are from the Ohlone tribe here in California. And they all look like African women who are painted for probably some kind of ceremony. And then to the left of the Ohlone ladies, you've got, goodness, I don't know if I can even read that. I think the guy on the left is from the Missouri tribe, maybe. The one in the middle is the Oto tribe, and then I'm not quite sure about the gentleman to the right. But then the young lady in the bottom left corner, she is Yuchi, also sometimes called the Koihoya tribe. Okay, so here are many, many examples, and there's even more. There's the Black Utes from Utah. So many that I couldn't, it would have been slide after slide after slide. So you get the picture. So then what differentiates them? Why are some black and then others are Asian looking? Great question. Okay, this DNA study says, great surprise, Native Americans have West Eurasian origins. Nearly 1/3 of Native American genes come from West Eurasian people linked to the Middle East and Europe, rather than entirely from East Asians as previously thought, according to a newly sequenced genome. Based on the arm bone of a 24,000-year-old Siberian youth, again, I don't think it's that old, the research could uncover new origins for America's indigenous peoples as well as stir up fresh debate on Native American identities. The study authors believe the new study could also help resolve some long-standing puzzles on the peopling of the New World, which include genetic oddities and archaeological inconsistencies. These results were a great surprise to us, said study co-author and ancient DNA specialist S.K. Willerslev of the University of Copenhagen, Denmark. I hadn't expected anything like this. A genome related to present-day Western Eurasian populations and modern Native Americans as well was really puzzling in the beginning. How could this happen? So what's new? The arm bone of a 3-year-old boy from the Malta site near the shores of Lake Baikal in south-central Siberia yielded what may be the oldest genome of modern humans ever sequenced. Don't think so, but we'll go with it. DNA from the remains revealed genes found today in Western Eurasians in the Middle East and Europe, as well as other aspects unique to Native Americans, but no evidence of any relation to modern East Asians. And I'll explain what all this means in a minute. Although we know that North Americans are related to East Asians, like meaning the Chinese, it's striking that no contemporary East Asian populations really resemble Native Americans, he said. It's not like you can say that they are closely related to the Japanese, Chinese, or Koreans. So there seems to be something missing. But this result makes a lot of sense regarding why they don't fit so well genetically with contemporary East Asians, because 1/3 of their genome is derived from another population. And so I say, my bottom thing is, I propose that the something missing, which is confounding the geneticists, is the mixture of the Hebrew Levant. So that's what they mean by Eurasia, what we call the Levant. See, the Middle East is a fairly new concept. There was no thing as the Middle East in ancient times. So we would call Eurasia, where Asia kind of meets up against Europe, that kind of area where we call the Middle East today was considered Eurasia. So I think what's confounding them is there's a mixture of the Hebrew Levant DNA, which is in the Eurasian, mixed with the Tungusic Siberian DNA. Okay, and where would they have picked up Tungusic Siberian DNA? When they were living in Arsareth in eastern Tartaria. So what they're really saying is they're very confused, because apparently most geneticists and genealogists assumed the reason that the Asian-looking Native Americans looked Asian is they just assumed that they had mixed with Chinese or Korean or Japanese populations. That's what they mean by East Asian populations. They just assumed that they had that they had come out of, Korean, Chinese, Japanese peoples. So this was a complete shocker, because there's no East Asian genomes there, but Siberian. so this is from the indigenous Siberian Regional Museum in Russia. It says Paleo-Indians from modern-day Siberia are thought to have crossed into the Americas. I'm not going to repeat the rest of that because we know how they crossed in. We covered that already in parts 2 and 3. And analysis of genetic markers has also been used to link the two groups of indigenous peoples. Haplogroup Q is a unique mutation shared among most indigenous peoples of the Americas. Studies have found that 93.8% of Siberia's Ket people and 66.4% of Siberia's Selkup people possess this mutation. The principal component analysis suggests a close genetic relatedness between some North American Indians, like the Chippewan, which are, I think, the Ojibwe, and the Cheyenne, and certain populations of central and southern Siberia, particularly the Kets, Yakuts, Selkups, and Altaians. At the resolution of the major Y chromosome haplogroups. This pattern agrees with the distribution of the mitochondrial DNA haplogroup X. So do you remember when we were going over the female haplogroups? It was A, B, C, D, and X. So, and we already saw from looking at the chart that C and D trace backwards to L2, which would be in West Africa. And so they're saying that this pattern of these male haplogroups of Q having genetic relationship with the Siberians, specifically the Kets, Yakuts, Selkups, and Altaians, and they're saying that that is patterned and matches with the mitochondrial DNA, the maternal DNA of haplogroup X, which is found in North America, but they said is absent from eastern Siberia, but it is present in the Altaians of southern central Siberia. So it's still from Siberia. Okay, so here are some examples of the above mentioned Siberian people groups. On the left, you've got the Ket people. There's a picture of a Ket man, and then below a Ket woman. Strangely, there are the Hmong people. They have oral traditions passed down from their elders that say they are somehow related to the Native Americans. I think that originally they were part of the larger Tungusic group. And then we've got the Selkup people on the right. And then there's also the Aleutian people, and then the pictures below, and then the Tungusic Nasovian people. And I did not pull any pictures of the Altaians, so I apologize, but you can look that up if you want to know what the Altaians look like. Now, I found this interesting. This guy, his YouTube channel is called I'm Sean, Get Off My Lawn, and I believe he's Russian. And he does a very engaging, kind of fun presentation showing how the Ket people and the Dene, the Navajo Dene, have share the same language, along with like the Northern Athabascan, which is the Dene, the Gwich'in, and the Dogrib, and but he manages to make a very boring subject actually fun and entertaining. So you can check this out if you want at his YouTube channel. And then he also shows, so on the left, the Y DNA haplotype Q1, this comes from his channel as well. And it's Q1 subclade, and then the Q1 subclade is Ket and Selkup, and then Q1A, 3A are the Native Americans. So they're saying that the Native Americans are a subclade from the Q1 Ket and Selkup. So, and then on the right are just some other images I found. The top is showing the Ket people having Y-DNA haplogroup Q, and then it's also showing that shows up a lot with the native South Americans. And I'm specifically looking at that picture, and I'm wondering if that would be the native Peruvians. But it didn't specifically say Peruvians, but that gentleman looks Peruvian to me. But if I'm wrong, feel free to drop a comment and let me know. So on the chart on the left, it says the highest frequencies of Q. Okay, and then it goes through the Kets have the highest frequency of male haplogroup Q, 93.8, and then Native South Americans, 92%, and then Native North Americans, 77%, and then it goes through the rest of those. So you can print that out if you want to look at that. And then again, just to prove that there is no Chinese, Korean, or Japanese admixture, I wanted to show you the haplogroup chart to the right. So to prove that the Native Americans don't have Chinese DNA, and that's not to say that none do, but by and large, it's the Siberian admixture that gives them the Asian look, not Chinese. And so the haplogroup for Chinese, Japanese, and Korean, so the Japanese and Korean come out of the larger Chinese. They're all related, and they are a O haplogroup designation, not Q and not P. And then the Samoyed, the Inuit, the Laplanders, Zemblans, etc. Are haplogroup N. Okay. So if they were related to those designations, they wouldn't be haplogroup Q or P. They would be haplogroup N or O, and they are not. Okay. So again, here's just this map from part 1, kind of showing where, when they would have crossed over either the Aleutian Islands or Kamchatka, you can look at the topmost part of Northwest America, and that's where a lot of those Siberian or Tungusic tribes landed. But then remember, they also dropped down into the rest of North America, Central America, and South America. Or, I don't know, they may have even sailed to South America. I'm not quite sure. But there is a high concentration in South America. Okay, so bringing this back up again, just so that you have a little bit more context now, that the ancient DNA haplogroup Q, and here are a list of tribes that are shown as having that haplogroup. I'm sure it's not a conclusive list. So that is why, in case you haven't put the dots together, so that is why we have some Asian looking Native Americans, and then why we have just black looking Native Americans that are not former slaves. So the black Native Americans have little to none of the Q. And so, actually, let me go back here for a second. So what this is basically saying is, if you are a male, Native American or indigenous person, and you take a Y-DNA test and it says that your haplogroup is Q, what this means is that as far as your ancestors are concerned, because remember that Y-DNA passes from father to son, to son, to son, to son, to son, pretty much wholly intact. It doesn't recombine, okay? So this is how we can tell through mitochondrial DNA and Y-DNA, getting a long-term picture of where our people migrated from, is because the Y-DNA and the mitochondrial DNA do not recombine, and it takes hundreds of years for even there to be even any type of a mutation, if there is going to be one. So if you are an indigenous person throughout the Americas and your haplogroup is Q, this means that anciently your paternal ancestors would have been from the Tungusic tribes. And then they most likely, depending on what your mitochondrial DNA says, but most likely those Siberian men intermarried with the Hebrew women, the Hebrew Israelites. Okay, but if you take a DNA test and it's not Q, and then maybe it is perhaps of the E1 classification, then that would mean that your paternal line is Hebrew. And then you'd have to see what your mitochondrial line is. So just the simple fact that the haplogroup for the Y DNA is Q, that means anciently all of your male ancestors came from one of those tribes in Siberia. Okay, and then I'm assuming most likely intermarried with the Hebrew women. Okay. Now, what about the Mexicans? We were talking about the Mexicans on part 5. So I wanted to see kind of what their haplogroups are, because I'm sure that some want to know. So first of all, I just asked, did a Google, and I asked, do all Mexicans have Aztec ancestry? Because I was wondering. And it says no, not all Mexicans have Aztec ancestry, as the majority of Mexicans have a mix of Spanish and Native American ancestry. And then it goes on to say that the Mexica were a Native American tribe that ruled over the Aztec Empire in the 15th century. So the 15th century would have been the 1400s. The name Mexico comes from the Mexica tribe. Most modern Mexicans are mestizo, which means they have mixed Spanish and Native American ancestry. Many Mexicans have no Spanish ancestry, which I thought that was interesting, and those still speak indigenous languages. And it says Mexicans down at the very bottom with the red box. Mexicans are primarily European and Native American in ancestry, European due to the Spanish, with a modest African contribution. Okay, so there is more proof. It's a small contribution because remember, every generation it cuts by 50%. Okay, so if you're full-blooded, if your ancestor who had full African DNA, you might be 5 or 6 generations down, and so little to none is going to show up. But I found it interesting that it did mention that in some of these there's a modest African contribution. Okay, and then to the left it says overall Mexican males possessed 21 different haplogroups. Most prominent of these paternal lineages were R1b, which comes from the Spanish, that's the European, Q, M3, which Q is from the Siberians, those Tungusic peoples, and then E1B1B, which we know comes from the Black Keepers, right? In Africa, this shows up in Africa. Okay, so this is just to give you a little idea. Obviously, it's not as simple as this, and I'm not trying to make light of this, but I've got a vast, I've got a large group of people watching these videos, and I'm trying to keep things super simple so that anybody can understand, because I hate it. How many times do we go to a doctor or we go to somebody who's an academic or professional and they always talk over our heads? And I never want to be one of those people. I want to speak plainly and clearly using everyday language and try to use pictures and language so to make it easy to understand. It doesn't have to be complicated. Okay, so we're going to talk about admixtures, autosomal DNA admixture. So this is not Y-DNA, this is not mitochondrial. We're back to autosomal, where our genes recombine, right? And admixture means when you're adding in another ethnicity. One or more ethnicities is called admixture, okay? So what do you get when you mix these ethnicities? Called admixture. And then I said a black person. Now I have a picture of a black male, but that could just as easily be a black female. So when you take a black person and you have admixture with a Caucasian white person, you will usually get a lighter skinned black person with some Caucasian bone structure. Okay, I think most of you would probably agree to that. And then the more Caucasian admixture, so if that lighter skinned black man were to marry a white woman, okay, or a Caucasian woman, then their children are going to be even lighter, okay? Or if he marries a I don't know, Chinese woman, right? They'll still have the darker skin, but there'll be more Asian features. So this is how admixture works. Okay, same as now, when you take a black person and you mix them with a Tungusic Siberian person in the middle, then you end up with Asian-looking black persons. So if you look at a lot of those Native Americans that are Asian-looking, they're still a brown or dark brown or reddish-brown peoples. Okay? They just have more Asian features. So then what do you get when you mix an Asian-looking black person with a European Spanish person? This is where you get a lot of the Mexicans. Not all, but the ones where, because remember we did have several Native American, several Hebrews, right, Hebrew Israelites that dropped down into Mexico and Central Asia. So if any of those happen to have the Siberian admixture, then that's why Mexicans sometimes can have a little bit of that look, but you're not quite sure what it is. But this isn't with everybody, so please understand me. Okay, so now we're going to talk about some autosomal DNA case studies. And let me pull over here. So when I first started finding all of this out, and I was like, I started praying. And the conversation was, okay, Most High, what does their DNA look like? How do I prove this from a DNA standpoint, right? I don't work for one of these testing companies, and many people I'm running into are concerned about testing with these companies because they're not sure about the privacy and where does their will their DNA get leaked, and privacy issues and all that. And so I literally just I kind of said in jest, I said, wow, I wish I were independently wealthy, then I could have my own lab with my own geneticist, and we could do this discreetly and securely and not have it be too big. But I just kind of left it before the Most High and just said, I wish there was a way that I could find out what the DNA of Hebrew Israelites looks like. And then that was probably about a year ago. And then little by little, I have actually been meeting different Hebrew people out and about. Like one instance, I'm not going to give the young man's name, but I had to go to one of the local nurseries over the summer, and I was looking to see if I could find a nectarine tree that didn't cost an arm and a leg. And so I had asked him if he could show me where like their discounted section was. And so he put me in one of the little golf carts, and this property was massive. So we're driving all over, and I just kept hearing in my spirit, he's a Hebrew. He's a Hebrew. So I just kept having him drive me around until I could get the courage up to kind of ask him, you know, do you know your family's ethnicity? Things like that. I said, have you happened to have taken a DNA test? And he says, well, it's, you know, so funny that you mentioned that, because I actually ordered a test off of off of Amazon. He had ordered one of the tests, and he said I'm going to be taking it. So I explained to him what I do and what my theory was, and he just kind of looked at me, and I said, if you wouldn't mind, I said, when you get your results back, you know, and I gave him my little, my email, and I said, can you keep in touch with me when you get your results back? Will you, can you screenshot me your results, and I can take a look at them and see? And he was all excited about that. And so he ended up doing that. And so I've been meeting a lot of different people like this, just randomly in different places. So this is how the Most High answered that prayer. I'm not independently wealthy, just kind of getting by like the rest of all of you too, but I didn't need a lab, and I didn't need fancy equipment, and I didn't need geneticists. He brings people to me that already took DNA tests. So I'm not trying to sign people up or get them to take tests. So don't be putting that stuff in the comments. These are people that of their own volition already have taken tests and were willing to share the results with me. And so I want to share some of those results with you. So that's kind of the backstory. Okay, our first case study is Bree, a lady named Bree. She's of mostly European descent on her mother's side. Her mother married a Mexican man. The Mexican man's paternal line was of Spanish descent, and the maternal line was indigenous Mexican. And so when she shared her DNA results with me, she's, no surprise, 73.5% European, and that includes the Spanish. And then she has 21% indigenous American, and 2.7% sub-Saharan African, 1.5% Western Asian and North African. So, so Western Asia would be like Eurasia. Okay, that's my understanding, in North Africa. And then she's got 0.3% of Central and South Asian, 0.1% East Asian, and then there's an unassigned amount. So now breaking Bree's ethnicity down by category, that sub-Saharan Africa is that she's got 2.7%. She's got 2.1% West African, and specifically Nigeria and Senegambian and Guinea. And then she's got small amounts from Congolese and Southern East Africa, so Angolan and Congolese, and then broadly Sub-Saharan Africa. Okay, and then the other ones, she's got some Arab, so some Ishmaelite, Egyptian and Levantine, that's the Levant, and then some Iranian, Caucasian, and Mesopotamian, and some North African. So now to the right, so again, as I was now collecting these, I was praying again, and I said, how do I prove this? What can I compare this to? And about that time, there is a phenomenal gentleman by the name of Benaiah Israel, and he has a YouTube channel called Hidden Hebrews. And about the same time, he popped up, or his video popped up in my YouTube feed. I didn't even have to go looking for it. It just popped up in my YouTube feed, and it's called Judah's Negro DNA Confirmed. And so he popped up this map of Africa, and then everywhere where you see like the green glowing hotspots, those are known places where Hebrew Israelites settled, okay, at different migration times. They didn't all settle at once. And so you can see on here at the bottom, there's the Lemba, and then Angola and Congo, and then you've got the Slave Coast up there, Slave Coast, Gold Coast, and you've got Nigeria and those. So I was like, thank you, Father, for confirming that. So now I use this map when I compare all of my little test subjects. So the next one, we call her Case Study Woman A. The following DNA results are from her paternal side. And then again, remember what we read last week? Some of the northern tribes traveled down from North America into Mexico and South America, right? And some of those claim descent from the tribe of Issachar, specifically through his son Tola. So on her father's side, she's got indigenous American. She is 52%. And again, if we double that, he would have been basically 100% indigenous American, Mexican. Okay, now her father also had the following ethnicities. And again, these are just small amounts, but you see the admixture here, okay? This is what I'm basically wanting you to see is the admixture. She's got West African, coming from Senegambian and Guinea, Nigeria, and broadly West African. And then she's also showing from Congolese and Southern East Africa, which is Angola and Congolese. And then as she goes down, she's got some India, right? From like India, which those were settled, if I remember correctly, by Abraham's second wife, Keturah, the native indigenous Indians. And then she's got some North African in there. Okay. The next, let me see. Let me go back here for a second. Oh, so woman A, this is still woman A. She took a mitochondrial DNA test because remember, women can't have Y DNA, so we can't do that. By the way, I should say this. If you are a female and you want to know what your father's haplogroup is, does he have any living brothers? Because remember, your father and any of his brothers all received the exact same Y DNA. Do you have any brothers? Your brothers would have inherited the exact same DNA that your father and his brothers did from the grandfather. So you can have male, relatives that are connected to the same haplogroup. You can test them to find out what the male haplogroup is for your family line. But for woman A, her maternal haplogroup is L2, and then the subclade is A1A. So again, on our map, L2 is West Africa, and then she's a subclade of that on her mother's side. Okay, case study, woman B. She was leery of taking a DNA test, but her sister had already taken one, and then they shared the results with me. So woman B, her sister is, and so she would have similar, not exact, but similar. But her sister has 3.3% indigenous American, and then she's got some North Asian, Manchurian and Mongolian, and then she's got some Congolese from Angola and the Congo. And then their mother's mitochondrial DNA. So their mother was of Aleut ancestry and was born in Eyak, Alaska. Her family most likely emigrated from the Aleutian Islands into Alaska. And the mitochondrial haplogroup is H1A, which if you look at the map to the right, I have a purple box around that. It's saying RO HV, H, and V are in Northwest Africa. Okay. Now, case study C is very, very interesting. So, woman C. Now, the following DNA results are from her paternal side. So, on her dad's side, woman C has roughly about 2% Native American. And the other thing is, I meant to say this earlier, if you do a DNA test, don't get caught up in the percentages, because these percentages are not exact. They're averages. And like for me, I took 5 different DNA tests over the past 5 years, and I wanted to see, is this for real? I wanted to see, is there overlap? Are these regions showing up on all of these? And they did, and some of them are a little bit better at giving the trace amounts. But my goodness, the percentages ranged all over the place from testing company to testing company. So, like at Ancestry, I had I think it was like 14% Irish, but then on 23andMe it was 40%. So they're just, I don't know. So just all that to say is, don't get caught up in the percentages. Oh, I'm 15% of this and I'm 30% of that. You could be a little less than that. You could be a little bit more than that. So the main thing to focus on is the ethnicities itself, not so much the percentages. But anyway, back to woman C. So she's got some Native American, and then she's got Central Asia and Asia South. But primarily, she is Eastern Europe because of Russia, right? Well, no, it just says Eastern Europe. And then she's got Finland with Northwest Russia in there. And then she's got 1% Polynesia. So remember what I said about like the Hawaiian Islanders, right? They were also Hebrew Israelites. So you may be looking at this and go, well, so what? What's the big deal? She's got, she's mostly Russian, right? So let's move on. Woman C, so here's her backstory. She was born into a Russian home. So I want to say either her great-grandparents or her grandparents migrated with a large group of Russian people in the 1950s. Okay, and they all stuck together. And so there was only, I think her parents were only like second generation maybe that were born in the States. And they settled up near LA in California. Okay, so she's mostly full Russian ancestry. Her father, though, told her on many occasions that his people were the Black Russians, and that she says that he has she said he had a darker complexion as she does as well. Now she's got bright blue eyes, but in the summertime she gets extremely dark, and she said this comes from her father's side. And then so she also said, and here's what I find very interesting, her family always followed Levitical law, Mosaic law. They observed the Sabbath. They never ate pork or any animal that would be considered unclean. They pretty much kept separate from the rest of society. They were a closed group. They were not allowed to marry outside of the group. And she often, when she was a young girl, when she would ask, well, why can't we do this and why can't we do that, and why do we not celebrate these holidays that, all her friends in school were celebrating? And she was told, because we are the chosen people and this is not what we do. So I want to now remind you, we get caught up with remember all of these, we had new maps and countries changed names, right? But what was Russia previously? It was Tartaria. But what was it before it was Tartaria? It was all part of Scythia. And if you look on the left side, we had that whole swath of land in the easternmost part of Scythia from north to south, and it was named Sinai. Okay, I think we all know what group of people would have been living in Sinai, right? And so it was then, if so, it was Scythia, and then it is my belief that when Genghis Khan and the Mongol hordes rose to power, the name changed perhaps at that point to Tartaria. Because if you even think of the name Tartaria, it kind of has a connotation to Tartarus, which is like in the underworld, right? Somewhere near Sheol. So, but before it was Tartaria, it was Scythia and then this separate land of Sinai. Her people, this woman's people, were in this area for a long time, and it was only and remember that I said that there were independent city-states. You had Kiev, you had the Rus people, you had Muscovy, which became Moscow, and then you had different independent city-states. Was it? No, St. Petersburg is at Moscow. So it's only been Russia since maybe the mid to late 1800s. And then once the Bolshevik Jews took over, all of that was hidden. So I find that very interesting. And there is a reason I think that her father said they were the black Russians. I think they were the black Hebrews living there. But in his generation, he wouldn't have known that. But the ancestors would have. Because how else would she have got American Indian and Polynesian DNA? They didn't intermarry with any of those people. Okay, so it's just very strange. Okay, I need to wrap it up because we've been going a little bit. So I had the test subjects who I gave them anonymous names because they wanted to stay anonymous, but I have a couple little Gen Z cuties that popped up in my YouTube feed because the Gen Z, they haven't lived enough life to be wary of anything yet, and they lived their whole life out on social media. And so this cutie, her name is Yuritsa Betancourt, and so I'm showing this because she has a public YouTube channel. It's public, and she did a DNA result reveal on her YouTube channel. So it's fair game. I'm not doing anything illegal, and same with the one after. So Yuritsa Betancourt, I believe she said she's Puerto Rican. I believe is what she said, or Dominican. No, Puerto Rican, I think. So on her reveal, she is about 31% Spanish, 20% Portugal, 18% indigenous Puerto Rico, and then she's got 8% Senegal, 5% Cameroon, Congo, and Western Bantu peoples, 3% Basque, which ties into the Spanish, that's the Iberian Peninsula, and then she's got 2% North Africa, 2% Nigeria, 2% Eastern Bantu peoples, 2% Benin and Togo, and then she's got like a trace amount of Northern Italy and a trace amount of Norway. And then she also has like just trace amount, like 1% Scotland, 1% Ivory Coast and Ghana, 1% Wales, 1% Indigenous America linking to Ecuador, and then 1% Mali, and then 1% European Jewish. So if you add up all those tiny little percentages, she has a fair amount of African DNA, and many of those places linking to North and West Africa. Okay, and here is Kaylin V. This is on her channel, and I believe that she's either Puerto Rican, I think, or Colombian. I think that's the Puerto Rican flag. Well, you guys can look it up. So Kaylin is 35% Spain, 24% Portugal, and usually they will go hand in hand. She is 16% Puerto Rico, 4% Cameroon, Congo, and Western Bantu. She's 3% England and Northwestern Europe. She's 3% North Africa, 3% Basque, which again ties in with Spain and the Iberian Peninsula. She's 2% Nigeria, 2% Mali, 2% Senegal, 2% Benin and Togo, and then she's 1% Ivory Coast and Ghana, and then 1% Sweden and Denmark. So again, if you add up all those tiny little percentages, she will have a fair amount of African DNA, and that linking to some of those Hebrew hotspots that Benai Israel had in his video. And then last, I've been getting emails from people, and also some people, a handful, have been commenting, wanting to know, they want to take a DNA test, what is my recommendation? And so just to be very clear, I don't have partnerships, sponsorships, nothing with any of the testing companies. Like, I'm nothing to them. Because I've been getting these questions, I did some sleuthing around to see what recommendations were, and it seems living DNA is really recommended because apparently they have broadened their database to include many more African regions than what any of the other testing companies do. And so living DNA, if you are an African Hebrew, you might want, and you're interested in taking a DNA test, you might try living DNA. And, Native American Hebrews, you can do that as well. But then there was also another one that came up called a Basic American Indian DNA Test. And this is super tiny, so you need to take a screenshot of this and make it bigger. But it lists several of the tribes that most of the other testing companies, like, you just get Native American or Indigenous American. They don't tell you what tribe. A lot of these testing companies will not break down the tribe for you. And so like to the right is a list of the tribes that they had mentioned on their website. Now their test is pricey. I want to say it's like $150 something, but I guess they get very, very specific. So, those are my suggestions, probably over some of the other ones. So anyway. Okay. Let me go back here. So my friends, thank you for staying with me for another episode. I hope that you have learned a lot more about DNA than what you knew previously. I hope this, for those of you that have already, taken DNA tests, or you've taken a mitochondrial DNA or a haplogroup, hopefully this helps you to be able to understand where those trace to and what that haplogroup designation means. And if you're finding this information helpful, feel free to share this. Feel free to share it with others, And what else? I can't think of anything else. But anyway, so this concludes the series on our northern Hebrew tribes, aka the 10 lost tribes. Next week, we're going to do wrap up and some Q&A. And then the week after that, we're going to start on the Kingdom of Judah. Okay, so if you have any specific questions for me, drop them in the comments. Remember to capitalize the word question with like a period or a colon, and then you can just, do regular typing and type your question in. But it just helps me find those with questions. And have a great week, and stay safe, stay well if you can. I know everyone seems to be getting sick right now, and we will see you next week. Take care.